we have another opportunity to collect another statement win on this season against the 11-1 Pittsburgh Steelers. Combined record 20-4. It is actually the highest combined winning percentage of any December regular season game in NFL history. So, yeah, I found that on Twitter about 5 seconds before we got on here. So I had to throw that out there. So with such an important game looming, had to pull out the big guns here for this episode. But before we talk football, just got to remind you guys, we are sponsored by Picasso's Pizza. They've been serving up delicious food in Buffalo for 4 generations, and everyone knows them for their delicious cup and char pepperoni. They are open for takeout and delivery, and they actually deliver nationwide. So I can have some sent to me on Long Island, and Jenna, if she's feeling nostalgic, she can have some sent to Pittsburgh too. No big deal. Now's the time to support local businesses. Please do your part by supporting our friends at Picasso's. As always, Kevin Messeri is here with me. Kevin, how's it going, buddy?
Living the dream, man. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this edition. One of the ones I was looking forward to the most.
Mm-hmm.
What a game! I mean, what a game!
Mm-hmm.
What a game for the fans it would have been. We were talking about that off air. So all we can do is just watch it from a football perspective from home. Be safe. The most important thing, obviously, right now. But this what a matchup for a lot of ways, and really looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, pull out the big guns. Really special guest who I know has probably been in high demand this week since obviously the ties to Buffalo. Jenna Harner, formerly WIVB in Buffalo, Ithaca College grad. She's now with WPXI in the Steel City. Jenna, thank you for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so glad to be here. We joked because all the players after last year, I think, had this game circled on their calendars. And then when I moved to Pittsburgh, I had this one circled on my calendar. I was like, oh, this is going to be so great. And of course, with the way that both of these two teams are playing, this is the Sunday night matchup. And this is what you want Sunday night football in December to be. This is what the textbook definition of it is. So I'm pumped.
Yeah, it really is the textbook definition. And, both teams have been playing great. But, that's a good way to start it because, unfortunately, Steelers, and my dad's upset about it too, took their first L of the season. He says that he's happy it happened against Washington because maybe they needed that wake-up call before they got to the Bills. So maybe we can start, would you I see you're nodding, you kind of agree with that? And what happened in the Washington game that kind of just, that let Alex Smith, continue his amazing story?
Well, the last 2 weeks between the Ravens game with all the craziness there and then the Washington game, these have been two of the Steelers, I guess, lackluster performances, for lack of a better word there. And it was funny because when I'm live tweeting the games and I'm covering the games, when I was covering the Ravens game, everyone that was watching nationally was like, wait a second, this Steelers team is 11-1. And I was like, that game was the worst game I've seen the Steelers play this season. Even the Titans game when they allowed Tennessee to come back, even the first Ravens game when they were down, even the Dallas game. I said the Dallas game that the Steelers played was a better game than that Ravens game. Mm-hmm. And I think they've just their struggles progressed a little bit more into this past week against Washington. I know everyone wants to look at the run game and talk about the lack of the run game and all that. They do have the short passing game that's made up for it a little bit, but they weren't able to get the run going. And then the last 2 weeks, when you have 7 or more drops by your receivers in 2 back-to-back games, the offense is, of course, not going to be able to click. That's one of the big struggles that they've been having. Deontay Johnson's dropped a couple, Eric Ebron's dropped a couple, and just continues. It makes sense. Obviously, the offense isn't able to stay out on the field, and we saw that again in Washington. And frankly, that's really what potentially led to that loss. So the offense wasn't clicking as much as it should have been. They were dealing with the loss of Bud Dupree.
Yeah.
So it's been they're figuring some stuff out, but I think people look at things and say, oh, good loss is good to get it off their back. They tell us all the time, they're a 1-0 team. They look to go 1-0 every week. That's what their goal is. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to lose to a team that doesn't affect your playoff standings in the AFC, it's not the worst thing in the world to get the monkey off the back. Mike Tomlin had kept saying, we keep learning and going through things and we're winning. Now we're facing adversity and we're learning while losing. So I don't want, players don't ever want to say good loss, but I think this was that almost wake up call in a sense where it's like, oh, there's some stuff we got to figure out here going into a game against the Bills.
Yeah, and you brought up the running back struggles there for a little bit. So would you equate that to James Conner being injured and being out? Now I know he was on the COVID list too, dealing with other injuries earlier in the season, and then behind it's Benny Snell Anthony McFarland, who, seems like he could be one of those diamond in the rough rookies just based on, his pedigree in college. So is it maybe because who's back there or the offensive line, or like what's kind of going on with the run game right now?
I think it's just been more of their wide receiving core. They have so many weapons. They're so deep there. I mean, any of those guys, between Chase Claypool, between Juju, between Deontay, between the catches James Washington has been making as of late, Ebron even has been making an impact. So there's a wealth of riches on this offense that they look to pass the ball more. And I think in those, I'm trying to backtrack a little bit, before the Ravens game, when you saw the Bengals game, when you saw the Titans game, Ben was kind of playing what he kept calling that backyard football, where he was going up to the line and telling, Juju, hey, you're going this way. Claypool, hey, you're going this way. And it was kind of that on the spot type thing, which again, coaches will say one thing that they're not doing it, but Ben was kind of no, that was what we were doing. And you saw that them having success with that, of course, because they have such a wealth of riches there that they didn't entirely need to rely on the run game. But the games that they've played well earlier in the season, James Conner, I think he's had 4 or 5 100-yard rushing games so far this season. I think it's 4. So he's been playing, when he's been kind of quietly playing well, but it hasn't really been that true part of their offensive identity. But when they've needed it in the last couple of weeks, they haven't been able to kind of find it and get the ball rolling there, which has been kind of crucial.
Yeah, it kind of sounds a lot like how the Bills are in the run game. Like Zach Moss and Devin Singletary haven't been anything to write home about at all. But when Josh Allen can throw the ball 50 times a game and half of them are intermediate passes to Cole Beasley or something like that, it's not that big of an issue. So I feel like their struggles in the run game might be a little overstated because. If we were to criticize the Steelers for that, we would have to do so many shows on just the Bills about it too. So, yeah.
There are those similarities too. Again, they use that short kind of passing game, those slant routes and things like that. And that really has been not a substitution per se of the run game, but that's been able to get them those short yardage situations that they look for on second down and things along those lines. So they haven't entirely needed to, but again, there's been the first Ravens game, they couldn't close things out when they needed to run the ball the most. And just those little situations where it, might be fine against, I don't want even the Ravens because Ravens have been playing, coming back from COVID, especially what we saw this week, that they're, still a decent team. But, when you're playing that against the Bengals, it's fine. But when you're trying to do that against a team like the Bills or the Chiefs or the Saints or whoever, is up at the top kind of thing here, when you get down the line in playoffs and things along those lines, you need that. You need that run game to complement for sure. And I think they're still trying to figure that out. We hear that's been kind of the main topic of discussion between that and the drops. That's everything we've talked to Mike Tomlin and Ben and the guys about this week. And, they're saying, hey, we're figuring it out. It's not, they're not going to, obviously give anything away or anything along those lines. But they said, we're addressing this. This is something that we're, continuously working on as we continue to work on everything else that we continue to work on.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, so James Conner is a player that's very interesting to me. The Bills actually, last season's matchup, he was out for a while and did happen to come back for that game. Same thing's going to happen this year. He's been out for a couple of weeks. He's going to come back right in from time for the Bills game. I remember that being a story last year, especially with Duck Hodges. But, it was a little bit more important then. It was a really big game for the Steelers. Not that it isn't this year. Still a huge game. Just let's look at Conner for a second. What do you see out of him when he's playing? Does he change the offense at all? I know there's been those struggles running the ball. Is he the same back that you saw preseason that we've seen over the years, or is there something more going on there? Is he still that threat that you have to account for if you're a defense in Leslie Frazier?
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see how he comes back from COVID. I think that's been one of the things that was my big concern when we looked at Lamar Jackson coming back, was how these players are going to react, because some of them have been saying, hey, I still have breathing issues. We heard obviously with Von Miller being injured, but we heard him say that when he had COVID. So I'm going to be interested to see. All reports kind of said that he was asymptomatic, so that was a really good sign. But it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic that he brings. But having him in there, he's such kind of, I don't want to say entirely a crutch, because I don't think that's the right word for it, but he has been that corner piece where he's someone that Ben knows if Ben needs to go to him, he can make those plays when he needs to. There's some times where it's the situation isn't right, and that may look kind of why it's like, he didn't get anything. He, lost a yard in that play, and it was like, oh, well, like, why were we calling this play at this type of time? So I think there's obviously all those contributing factors too, but he's been solid. I think this season, everyone was kind of worried about, is he going to get injured? I know it's always a big thing. He does seem to be a little bit injury plagued. But when he's been healthy this season, which he has for the majority of it, other than this most recent COVID being put on the COVID list, he's been able to, play really well. I think that he's not the main focal point because of their wide receivers and because of what they like to do on offense, but he's definitely someone that, the Bills are going to have to make sure that they account for. He, was returning to practice. We kind of saw him through practice today and things along those lines, but he's, and we know he's hungry to get back on the field and kind of make an impact and to make a statement to everybody that's saying, hey, the run game isn't here. He's gonna be like, hey, hi, hello, I'm here. Look at what I can do.
Yeah, and the biggest difference between the game this year and the game last year, obviously, is that Ben is actually going to be healthy and playing for this game. And so, I feel like if he was last year, the Bills are a completely different team now, and I don't feel bad about saying I don't know if they would have come out on top in that game if he did play. Now, the offense can keep up with pretty much anyone in the league, and we'll see if they can do it against, one of the best defenses in the league. But, about Ben, he's currently 5th in MVP odds right now. And oddly enough, Josh Allen is number 3. So we have 2 of the top MVP candidates in this game, which is fantastic. What have you seen from him this year? How has he looked coming back from those injuries? I know there's been some concerns about him breaking both knees on one play almost earlier this year.
Everyone took a collective gasp when that happened. Was the Titans? That might have been out of the Titans game.
I think it was, yeah.
Everything's blended together. But oh my goodness, yeah, you held your collective breath there. But that was the big question kind of coming into the season was how was his arm going to look? What was he going to be able to do? Was he still going to be able to throw the deep ball? How was he going to be able to find his receivers? He's been, answering those questions just fine. I mean, again, take out the last 2 weeks in terms of what they've done, but they had scored. There's only one game where they didn't score more than 25 points. Like this offense was drastically different than it was last year and when these two teams met last year. Mm-hmm. And he, again, sample size of having to take out the last 2 weeks, they've been so drastically different than the majority of the season. But, he has confidence in all of his guys to make plays. And he, continues to tell us, especially with like Chase Claypool as a rookie, who I look at all the rookies this year and it's just crazy to see the impact that they're having. Mm-hmm. With what they've been able to, oh my gosh, yeah, and just with what they've been able to do, and especially like among the Steelers too. We were kind of I was talking with some of the guys at practice today, and it's crazy to look at all of how much of an impact all of them are making, or all of them have made. Mm-hmm. But with Claypool, Ben has trust in Claypool, at least from what he's telling us, that he does in Juju, because he tells us all the time, Chase Claypool's going to make a mistake. And he's not going to make the same mistake again. And it's interesting now because we're getting to that point where like Claypool's college season would be just about finishing, whereas, he's continuing the stretch of the NFL season. So how is he going to kind of continue to deal with that stress and taxing on your body kind of moving forward here? And we haven't really seen crazy explosive games from him lately. So he's going to be looking to get back to things. But Ben has been playing with a lot of confidence and he's been looking good. There is the question about like the batted balls at the line, because that's been a big thing. And that was, eventually what pretty much led to them losing against Washington the other day. So, but I mean, I think everybody looks at it too. It's like, okay, we know fourth quarter Ben Roethlisberger, even second half Ben Roethlisberger. So he can never be counted out. Like when that game was happening towards the end the other night, I had some friends that grew up Patriots fans that are big in the sports world. And they were like, yeah, I wouldn't. This game's not over. No. I've seen this story. No.
Then he did get a tip though, a tip interceptor to end the game. So I guess it's full circle there for you. That makes sense. The receivers are really interesting for me out of Pittsburgh. Yeah. In Buffalo, it's not that it's not interesting that they're good here in Buffalo. I don't want to say you know what you're going to get, but you kind of do when John Brown's playing. You know what Cole Beasley's going to do, just a crazy good slot receiver. Stephon Diggs is everything advertised. Gabe Davis, another good rookie story, stepped in nice for John Brown and played every snap. So that's really huge on the Bills front. So we kind of know already about the Bills wide receiver room, but the Steelers wide receiver room is so interesting to me because I've family and friends down in Pittsburgh who they just think differently of Juju Smith-Schuster. Like everyone has their opinion on him. And then, the drops that you mentioned earlier. What's your just opinion of that all-around receiver room? And then Chase Claypool popping up today on the injury report for his illness. Is that a concern? So I guess just all of that all in one, I think would be really useful, because I've seen people, media, fans all over on the Steelers receiver room.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's like you have to look at every game before the Ravens and the Washington game with that. But there's not entirely that quote unquote go-to guy, which I think is just so interesting. Like with what you were saying with the Bills, like I immediately am like, okay, if it's going to be a deep play, like Josh Allen is going to be looking for Stephon Diggs. That's why they brought him in as that number one guy. Whereas obviously Juju kind of is that guy. It's also hysterical too. Juju's the vet in that wide receiving room, which is crazy because he's so young. But and Randy Finkner, their offensive coordinator, like called him the dad of the group, and I'm like, you can't call someone who's 23 years old dad of the group. But I mean, just how young that they are. But you never entirely know who the go-to guy is going to be, and then you have the addition of Eric Ebron being the weapon that he is when he can catch the football, with minus the last couple games. But they have so many weapons that it's like there's not one go-to guy. So Ben, can find Claypool deep for 40 yards. There's also definitely this is something to watch for, but I want to say almost every game, if not like every 2 games, Claypool has been able to draw a defensive pass interference call. And
interesting.
That's been something I think I tweeted the other day. It was like death taxes and Chase Claypool drawing a defensive pass interference.
Levi Wallace. I mean, with the matchup with Levi Wallace coming, and apparently he had a bad pass interference call, Brandon Ayuk last week, or Debo. I can't remember who he was covering. He was covering Ayuk for most of the day.
Yeah.
So bad call, but at the same time, he's handsy. So yeah, that's a really good point that you mentioned. That could be the matchup. Obviously, Juju probably is going to see Trey White in this game, but Claypool, I guess the illness is that I know people are taking even non-COVID related illnesses very, very seriously right now. Is that a concern with it only being a couple of days out, or anything that you know about that coming up out of nowhere?
It's something to keep an eye on for sure, because obviously he wasn't at practice today. So the Steelers are taking everything super seriously, as most. I mean, the Bills obviously too. I just don't know entirely how they're handling all the protocols and stuff. But if players have any sort of cold symptoms, they're sent home. So for all we know, he could have the sniffles. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Like tomorrow, if he's still on there, it might be a little bit like, but. Chris Wormley was on the injury report yesterday with an illness, and today back at practice. So it feels more cautionary to me, but definitely something to keep an eye on there, just because again, we with all this COVID stuff, we don't entirely know. So it could just be something small, or it could be something more, but it feels more precautionary than anything.
Gotcha. And that's definitely, like, I would never wish injuries or COVID especially on anyone. It would be nice to not have to worry about Chase Claypool, because he is a monster of a human being. He's a huge guy, super difficult to cover. I wanted the Bills to draft him too. I was happy I could at least half root for him for my dad on the Steelers. But unfortunately, making news today, Steelers linebacker Vince Williams going on the COVID list, won't be there on Sunday. And with Bud Dupree and Spillman or Spillane, is that it? Yeah, okay. I had the name. I was almost at CJ Spiller. Now the Steelers' healthy linebackers are Avery Williamson, who you guys got in the trade from the Jets, or free agents, can't remember. Sorry. And then Marcus Allen, who someone on Twitter said he's a converted safety, I guess. So yeah, the linebacker unit. When it comes to, maybe that could be a spot that Cole Beasley, Dawson Knox, and the running backs might be able to exploit.
Don't forget Devin Bush on IR too.
Oh yeah, and Devin Bush on IR too. Yeah, forgot about that one. Thank you.
Yeah, that's crazy, because that feels like it was so long ago. If the Steelers had one position that you were like, just nobody get sick, nobody get hurt, it was the linebackers, it was the interior linebacker. So definitely this is a big blow, and I've been telling people here, I'm like, this is something that the Bills can look to exploit. But at the same time, I kind of joked, I'm like, it's a good thing the Bills really like to throw the ball. I was like, if there's one like bright part of that. But yeah, this is kind of a huge blow, and Spillane had been doing such a good job filling in for Devin Bush, and seeing him go down against Washington, you could tell he was in a decent amount of pain. So they're hopeful that they're going to get him back for at some point the rest of the season, but definitely not looking like he's going to play this week, which that in itself is a big thing. And then losing Vince just because of what he brings there, and it makes them such a dimensional defense versus now, okay, you're really going to have to, rely on your front a lot and then make sure, the guys back. And also Joe Hayden, cornerback, is also dealing with, he's in the concussion protocol. He didn't practice for the second straight day. So I don't know. I'm always terrible with injury things. I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen. And then something might happen. So I don't see him playing, but I might be entirely wrong with that. Who knows? He might end up playing, but he's still going through the concussion protocol. They're banged up. This is the most banged up that they've been on defense, especially after losing Spillane and now losing Vince. So this is kind of a big, if the Bills are looking for that area to kind of hone in
offensive
on.
Game?
Say that again?
Offensive game? If everyone's looking for, it's expecting defense to get an offense, huh? And that's
did you guys look at here?
What's that?
What?
Oh, did it? It froze. Oh, no.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Jenna.
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we're back.
Thank goodness.
We're back.
Oh, my God. My heart dropped. Okay.
We're live. No, I was just saying, due to the defensive injuries, can we expect an offensive game for once between these two teams? It generally wouldn't be.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I keep telling people what I think that matchup is going to come down to. It's going to be which offense can stay on the field longer. And I keep saying if the Steelers want to stay in this game as much, their defense is what it is. Obviously, yes, they're missing pieces, but TJ Watt's still going to be TJ Watt. All these guys on defense are going to be those guys. Cam Hayward's going to be who he is. They're still going to make plays. They've shown that all season long. That's why they're one of the top in the league. But if this offense wants to keep them in the game, which they said they want to do, that was like one of Ben's big things. He's like, we don't want the defense to have to make the plays. Like, we want to be on the field. We want to be the ones making the plays and, winning the game for the team. Obviously, it's team win. But that I think that's what we're going to see. Hopefully, again, all the guys that we talked to this week, when we talked to Juju this morning, he was saying, they're, guys are catching the ball and they're just turning and making that one move, so there's correctable mistakes. The jobs are definitely correctable, but if the Steelers can get back to the way that they've been playing kind of the midseason, when they beat the Browns, when they beat the Bengals, when the offense is really clicking on all cylinders, then I think that this should be an offensive game, which again, I don't think most people would have thought coming into the season.
No, certainly not. Back to the concussion problem for Hayden. The Bills are notorious 1 week you're out. Like, it just that you saw it, Morse, whatever happened with him and the extra week debacle here. We still don't know if that was rest, which I don't think it was. I think they were going with their best offensive lineman in that game. But he did at least a week prior to that as well. And then anytime you see an injury, I think Micah Hyde missed a week with an injury as well to a concussion. So in the Bills world, it's an auto 1 week sit. So we'll see how the Steelers play that. But more importantly, the cornerback room, what does that look like? Do you know what that would look like without Hayden? That's a huge matchup, obviously, the Bills being very strong at receiver. What would that look like? Is it Hilton? Who steps into that cornerback room to get prominent snaps there? I know Sutton plays a lot. Is it Hilton? Steven Nelson? I know you Pittsburgh likes to play Justin Lane. So how would that look without Hayden?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting picture. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to shape out because they have Minka back there being able to float because they know that they can kind of lock the two guys on the sidelines and have them kind of continue there where that's why Minka's been getting all the interceptions. I joke, I'm like, how is he always there? How is he always in the right place at the right time? That's why he's the first round, that value of that trade, worthy of a first round pick. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of the options that they choose to do here, just because, it is going to be just, do they move Minka over? Exactly. How are they going to shift things with the potential loss of Hayden? But Steven Nelson's been playing pretty solid. I think Justin Lane, we saw kind of Washington was able to exploit him a little bit when he was on the field. It wasn't like anything existential or crazy by that means. But it's going to be an interesting matchup. And I think, again, when you're going against the Bills receivers the way that they've been playing this season, it's like, this will be interesting.
Yeah, when people say when you're going against the Bills receivers, I still can't believe that it's actually real, My entire life, I was trying to think because obviously Bills extended Brandon Bean today, news that broke, and I was thinking have the Bills ever even extended a GM in my lifetime? I'm trying to remember. I don't think so.
He might have gotten something. I can't remember if he got some type of half extension or something. I can't recall.
Yeah, it's just fun.
No, the
Football's
wide receiver room is crazy. That's why that matchup's so important. The room he was able to build with, even Gabriel, he's a guy that most, will have crossover editions, will have other people on, and people are just like, they don't understand. Oh, you're missing John Brown. Well, yeah, I mean, it is a big loss, but Gabriel Davis has been a huge step in for this roster and this team, and playing every snap is telling for me that that's why they play a lot of 10 personnel. I mean, they're fine with going 4 wide, 5 wide when they had John Brown and Dawson Knox coming into it, and with the lack of linebackers there. So that back 7 is hurting in Pittsburgh right now. Obviously they have Watt, great defensive line. So there are challenges there, but I would expect a quick passing game from Dable. We'll see. And then the one thing that everyone's talking about is the Bills don't run the ball. But when did they run the ball? In the rain against New England. And then they ran the ball against the Chargers when most people thought for sure they were going to throw the ball. So they ran the ball a lot in matchups that they like. They won't just go to the run game, and that's pretty obvious. For some reason, they didn't like it against San Fran. They're like, we're not, it's not going to be our number one priority. Will it be with the lack of linebackers? I don't know, because I still think that they could exploit the corners. So what do you think? Do you think the Bills will shock and run the ball? Because Dable's been known to just be like, Josh Allen's really good. I don't care. We're going to run the ball in this one because they don't have linebackers.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be, I was telling somebody at Steelers practice today, I was like, watch Brian Dable be very creative with his play calling, which we've seen this season. I mean, I tell people too, the Bills are probably the second team that I watched the most this season, just because of, seeing everything and knowing this matchup was coming down the line, and, obviously always wanting to follow the Bills, covering them for the last 2 years. But I expect expect the unexpected from
100%.
people, but then also expect the expected, because the expected is that you don't know what you're going to get from him, and that's a great thing in that sense. But I kind of see this Bills team being that very complete team, where if they need to go to the run, they will, and they'll be able to, because of the weakness and vulnerability of the Steelers linebackers right now. But I think you'll see some quick slants to Beasley. I think that will work really well in their favor. But then I also think, again, Josh Allen, we know he can throw the deep ball very well. I've been telling everybody here, I'm like, everyone's, the accuracy things. I'm like, Josh Allen last year to Josh Allen this year is an entirely different quarterback. Night and day.
Yeah.
So, obviously we know he can take the deep shots. We know that Diggs can make the big plays. We know that, and Beasley's been making plays too. And obviously what you're saying with Gabe Davis too, he was so impressive in that San Francisco game when I kind of caught the recap of everything too. So I kind of see a combination of everything, because Dable's going to look and say, okay, here's the area of weaknesses among a defensive unit that didn't have a lot of them and really still is pretty strong. I feel like everyone here kind of makes it seem, as football fans, diehards do, the world's ending this and this and this, but he's going to be able to exploit that and, find the ways to at least attack it. And I think the Steelers are going to have to kind of figure out how they're going to, prevent against that as much as they can.
And you, as much as any other reporter for another team, has seen Josh Allen's growth, come full circle here. But what is there a perception of him in Pittsburgh that among the fans, among the media there? Because we usually like to ask, the crossover people, hey, what do you think of Josh Allen? But you kind of already said that. So is there? What do you think the Pittsburgh fans and media are walking into a battle that they don't really know what they're going to get with him, or what's their perception?
I think fans are still a little, I don't want to say apprehensive, but most of them that haven't kind of entirely seen what he's done this season kind of still look to the game last season. I think that's usually a big focal point for everybody. It's like, oh, well, what happened last season? Well, it wasn't the greatest game. I remember it being it was close. It was kind of a nail biter right till almost the end there. And again, I was like, everyone's like, oh, it's Josh Allen against Duck Hodges. But I think in the media, at least, I think people that have read and seen what he's been able to do this year are like, oh no, he's a very legit threat. And I think a lot of people that might not entirely be as up to date with that kind of look at it. It's like, oh yeah, no, Josh Allen has, can throw the ball deep, but has accuracy issues, has this and this. It's like, this offense is so much more complete than it was a year ago. And it was still pretty complete last year. But obviously, again, the addition of Diggs has been just so huge in so many ways. And it's been funny because I've been asking a lot of the guys that we've been talking with this week, what's different about this matchup from a year ago to now? Because obviously there's so many things on the face value. Again, it was Duck versus Josh Allen. It was, both teams were kind of around the same record, going for that playoff spot. Whichever team was going to win was going to kind of lock in that berth. Where it's now, you have the two division leaders being as solid as they are this season, having this kind of seasons that they're having. So it's been interesting to hear those. But I think in the media, people understand what Josh Allen has done and the growth that he's had this season. But I think fans are still kind of like, who haven't seen a ton of what he's been able to do this season, are kind of like, oh yeah, no, the defense will still be able to hold. It's like this. Some people might be in for some big surprises, honestly, this weekend, just because we know Josh Allen can make the plays that he's been able to make this season.
Yeah, Bills fans had a field day with Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. First game.
He
didn't know how good he was, and he had to turn on the film himself as a defensive coordinator. Like, I get what he was saying, I do. But at the same time, the comments of people, was it against someone said called DK Metcalf not as good as Calvin Johnson? Wasn't that the comment Jim Schwartz made?
Yeah, someone said that he's really good, but he's not quite Calvin Johnson yet.
Right, okay. Yeah, but I just wouldn't have said something like that about, like, you're acting like you don't know who your opponent's quarterback is prior to Wednesday when you're really diving into the film. Josh Allen clearly growing up a 49ers family, all had to hear it, going to Candlestick Park. Clearly took personal to the fact that another defensive coordinator wouldn't have known the kind of season he's having. And that's just kind of what he's done all year. We had fun with that. Like, a lot of media accounts and Bills fans just were after it because, just the look of despair he had on the sideline at the end of the game. And, basically everyone saying, hey, now do you know who Josh Allen is? It was a field day for us. So it's kind of been that kind of party for Josh Allen this season, where any of the haters, draft Twitter, whatever, that had a field day against him in the first year or two, are now really having to submit their forms of apology to Josh Allen. And we're saying here in Buffalo that Josh Allen's going to get a lot of people fired because they're going to try to mold this clay that he is and make a quarterback that I've seen a lot of Drew Lock comparisons of, Drew Lock struggling, blah, blah. But look at Josh Allen, he developed. He's going to get a lot of coaches fired. So I think what's interesting on a fan's end is to just watch him, especially in Pittsburgh. You watch him exactly a year ago. Watch what he does now compared to how he looked then. What you're right, it wasn't that great of an offensive game. It was terrible. The Bills defense played really good in that game. It was Duck Hodges. But this is a matchup up against two top 5 MVP candidates and two potential teams that could play at least in the division round, if not the AFC Championship game, if one of them can get by Kansas City. So this is a game that's not just, hey, who's going to play better defense? Obviously, that's going to play a role. But watch Josh Allen and watch his development. And I think the biggest thing that, even Steelers fans can do in this game is see he's not that same guy. He's a 70% completion percentage guy. He makes every throw. And the throw to Gabriel Davis over one of the best pass coverage linebackers in the league, and Fred Warner last week, was just absolutely masterful. It's Patrick Mahomes' style of play. So all you can do is really tip your cap to how good he is. And you saw the Brandon Beane extension today, and Sean McDermott, in the summer, all three of, that's really all hand in hand of what was able to get done here in Buffalo. So I think the perception for fans in Buffalo has changed. Anyone that hasn't liked Josh Allen, I don't think there's anyone left. Him off the field is fantastic. He's just one of the best off the field guys. He makes jokes. People seem to like them.
He
jokes.
Tweets at Rainn Wilson. It's just a perfect situation. This is the first time I don't have I usually have an office background, and I changed it for Thanksgiving, and now I feel like I got to go back to it. I don't know.
So to wrap up that rant. Would you say that, I know you probably, I don't know if there's, with no fan interaction right now, it's tough, but would you say that generally in Pittsburgh, it's been more tentative, like, oh, it's still the Bills 9-3 at this point, still inaccurate Josh Allen, or are you starting to hear more of those rumblings that, all right, he didn't play well, particularly last year when he played him, but, now I'm a little bit nervous because if they do beat us, this thing gets tight really quickly.
Yeah, it was funny. I said on one of our post-game shows after the Ravens game I said that looking at the records of other teams, who's going to be a big matchup for these teams. And I was like, yes, I'm a little impartial because I covered the Bills, so I know them more than most people here. But I said the Bills at 8-3 at the time are an entirely different team than the Browns at 8-3. And people were like, yeah, no, you're right. Like we're not overlooking the Bills. Everyone, here obviously is like, oh, it's the Browns. Yeah, they're 8-3, but it's the Browns.
I mean, even us in Buffalo do that. Like Baker's been his Baker. He's been better. But still, I look at it like that's like the 2017 Bills to me, where it's like they're good. They're going to do their thing. They're probably going to be bounced in the first round, but good for them to break their curse and break everything going on there. But is that really a good team? You watch them more than we do here.
Honestly, before like the Titans game, I didn't get to see the first half of it, so I need to go back and really actually look at that more. But like the Texans game, they barely beat the Texans. That game was 3-0 until the fourth quarter. Like and then they barely beat the Jaguars, and they barely beat. Oh, it's gonna kill me. It might have been the I need to double check this because it's
they almost dropped 30 points against the Cowboys. They were up like 30, and the Cowboys were like one play away from tying it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was wild. So it was the Cowboys early on this season in that game. So
did I lose you guys? I think you're here.
No, we're here.
Okay, good. I feel like it might be my internet, which is funny because I'm at work right now. So, but I think we're doing okay.
Yeah, we're good.
We won't rant too much on the Browns. You watching them a little bit from your perspective. It is interesting because that is a competitor the Bills could potentially face in the playoffs. And, you guys know, I mean, Pittsburgh's going to play them in week 17, right? Week 17. To the end of the season.
Everyone kind of is like, it's weird. Everyone here has to be like, oh, we kind of have to root for the Ravens this week because it's Ravens-Browns on Monday. And if the Ravens win, then the Browns, it just makes it weird.
Right, that's true.
Kind of come down to week 17. So, but anyways, we can go back to perception of the Bills. But people, people have been kind of looking at this like, oh, this is going to be one of the best teams that the Steelers have faced this season. I think people know that, especially with how they've been playing too. So even if just like for Bills fans, like looking at for Steelers fans looking at the Bills record, just kind of on face value and seeing who they played. I mean, everybody saw obviously the Arizona game, which like that broke my heart.
So bad.
Thank you for saying that.
So bad.
No. And if it was Larry Fitzgerald, people would have been enjoying it more here in Pittsburgh. But
true.
That was something.
I'm sure the AFC enjoyed it, though. I mean, that's why not have a competitor lose like that? Yeah. The other AFC teams, it was brutal. It wasn't. What I tell people on the show is that it wasn't even the play call. The play call was a drag route across the field to Andy Isabella or Larry Fitzgerald, and he had no other way. He got rushed out of the pocket. He had nowhere else to go and didn't even really know where Hopkins was. It was just incredible. The play call, even I think Kingsbury admitted it wasn't even a Hail Mary attempt. They were trying to get out of bounds, but. What can you do? I mean, it's just fascinating to see plays like that. But the schedule is one thing I want to ask you about. The Bills had this luck last year. I don't want to say luck. They got to beat who's in front of you. How good were they last year? They didn't really have huge wins. Obviously, the Steelers have done well against the Ravens. Is there any of that talk that they're a little nervous because of the schedule? Is it no one cares? To me, looking at it from an outsider's perspective, it's like, wow, that reminds me a lot of the 2019 Bills where that's nothing there. I mean, maybe Bills fans are just getting overly happy that they're beating Seattle. They're beating the Rams. They're taking care of, in our case right now, Miami, teams that have 8+ wins. We don't see that too much in Pittsburgh. Is that a topic of conversation there, or does really after last year, no one cares?
No, I think that's a good question because it's kind of that combo of both. But I think there is that kind of talk, especially outside in. It's like, oh, well, before they lost, like, okay, they're 11-0, but they haven't played anybody. Right. And it's one of those things. It's like, okay, that's one thing the team always says, we control what we can control. That's literally pretty much one of the only things that they physically don't have control over.
Yeah.
And it's the schedule. So, and then you look at things like, should they be winning these games by more? Is this a team that plays down to their opponent? Like, there's all those factors in there. But then I kind of look at it at the end of the day, too. It's like, okay, good teams find ways to win. And prior to the Ravens and the Washington game, like, they almost blew the lead in Tennessee, and who knows what would have happened there. But again, they won that game. They found a way to come back against the Ravens. They found a way to come back against the Cowboys. Like, they were showing that they can win even in the face of adversity. But I think, there are those questions where it's like, okay, should we be beating these teams by more? Is this that thing? But I mean, you talk to the players and they're always like, at the end of the day, we just hope that we win, and we hope that we kind of come out injury free, which obviously is the case. But I mean, it was really interesting seeing their demeanor after the Ravens game, because they were frustrated. They were very mad. It's like, you won. Yes, obviously it was the game, but it was like, it's a weird anomaly, I guess, to see from players after a win. It's, Tomlin was very frustrated. All the receivers that we talked to were frustrated. Ben was visibly frustrated, and I think it was weird kind of then shifting and seeing them this week, where it was like, they were kind of just honest with things, and they're like, yeah, the better team kind of won in this game. So I think there's been those questions about the question marks about the schedule, but again, obviously with the team, you can only play who's in front of you, you can only win who's in front of you. They always say that they want to go 1-0 every week. But I think, again, this is kind of why this game is going to be such a big test to see, hey, where they are really at. I think both sides have been saying, the Steelers have been saying, hey, this is a great Bills team. We can kind of see where we match up. And the Bills have been saying that too. So I think that's why it's going to be such a great game in that value for itself.
Yeah, it is going to be a great game. And maybe that's a good segue to get into some score predictions for the game. I know you're torn between the city you once loved and your new home, but I'm going to ask you, what do you see happening? What's your final score prediction? How do you see it playing out?
That's really funny, because we do, for a bunch of stuff here, I do some podcasts here as well, and we always do pick-ems, and for the Jerome Bettis show that we do on Fridays, we always all pick the games and stuff like that. So I've picked the Steelers every week leading up to this, because I've been confident in the fact that they're going to win a game. Last week was the first week I was wrong. Oh, and I tell everybody, I was like, this is so hard for me. I'm like, take out I loved covering the Bills. I love covering the Steelers. I preface that I grew up a Giants fan, so I don't actually have rooting interests for both of these teams. But I think right now, with just the way that the defense is, the injuries that the Steelers defense is dealing with, the fact that they don't have Vince, with the way that the offense has played the last 2 weeks, I think it's going to be the Bills. And I tell people, I'm like, if you had asked me after the Titans game, the first Ravens game, the Cleveland game, the Cincy game, maybe even the Dallas game, if you'd asked me after any of those games, I would have said it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a shootout, but I think the Steelers can come out on top. I just think that the Steelers are dealing with too many injuries on defense right now, and especially, again, losing Vince today was kind of a really big blow. Yeah. I think that the Bills win this game. I think it's still going to be a solid one. I'm going with 27-24, but it wouldn't surprise me if both teams scored higher. But yeah, I'm going 27-24 Bills. I think it's kind of, we see some really good spots and we see some really bad spots kind of, from both teams a little bit. We'll see some punts. We'll see some trick plays. We'll see, Ben leading a really long drive. We'll see Josh Allen having a really explosive 2 or 3 play drive that ends in a long touchdown. But it's going to be a good one. But I just think the Bills, with the way they've been playing right now, are just the better offense. And that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah. That's really good prediction. And for me, it's equally, so I'm 11-1 picking the Bills, picking Bills games, I should say. And the only loss I have is Tennessee. That was such a weird game with COVID rules and changing of it. They came out and laid an egg. I wish that game was replayed at some point later this season. But anyways, I agree. I think it's going to be a little bit more offensive. I think missing their defensive play callers a big deal. Vince Williams, he calls the plays, right? Am I mistaken?
The green dot kind of switches. It was Spillane for at least a decent part of it, but he's just kind of such that big, with the veteran presence that he has, he always can see those types of things, especially working with the younger guys, with the newer guys. In terms of with Spillane, that was a big part of it. So that's a big loss.
Yeah, and I guess missing both of them makes it even bigger. If you have one or the other, maybe you can get through it. It's a big deal. I saw even Steelers fans we don't know who's going to call plays. I did see that on Twitter today. So it is going to be something interesting to follow in this game. I do think it matters a little bit, not a whole lot, but I think it matters a little. And I'm going Buffalo 31-21. I think that they showed what they could do. Everyone was talking this San Francisco defense up, they're going to win. They're going to get back in the playoff hunt. They're going to be so good. They don't have, that hard of a schedule. Mullins is going to get, the bridge to Kittle and all of this and that. They just tore apart that defense. That was top 7 in a lot of categories. So the Bills struggle against offensive teams that can put points on the board. Can Pittsburgh do it enough? We're going to find out. Can they run the ball enough? That's where they lost to Kansas City. They really contained Patrick Mahomes in that game. Sean McDermott will tell you, they ran the ball over us, but we controlled them to under 30 points. That was a win. So that's what I have in this one. It's such razor thin that one turnover can flip this over, but that's where I'm going to go. And I think that they'll be going into the Patriots game in a couple weeks. I just want to make sure they have enough cushion that doesn't become a topic of discussion, because they're playing good football. And we've seen Bill Belichick do good things against quarterbacks. We saw his Herbert masterpiece. Like, I don't want any part of that game being super duper important. They'll have to get it done this week, because my sentiment against Bill Belichick, and Josh Allen's always struggled against him in every single game, is going to be completely different. So I think they get it done. I think the home field does matter for routine, not because of fans. Routine being there, knowing the facilities, knowing your field. A lot of people don't love playing in Buffalo that aren't aren't Bills players. Field, I've heard field. It wasn't the Steelers even that complained about it. I can't remember. I can't remember if it was a couple of years ago. They complained about the playing field in Buffalo, but
yeah, I remember
that's where I got this one, and I think it's going to be. You're right. It's going to be a great football. It's a treat for Sunday night. They picked this one a winner. What a treat of a game that we're going to get, and hopefully I don't jinx that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not often that these late part of the season primetime games actually turn into being good games. Like, I know, usually it's like, the Jaguars could really be leading the AFC South by then. Maybe this game will matter. It's nice to finally have a good one. I think it's going to be a very high scoring game. I think that the Bills will win, but I'm worried about whoever Levi Wallace is going to be covering. I'm worried about James Conner on the ground coming back. He's going to, want to establish that Pittsburgh ground game again. I think it's going to be the Bills 37, Steelers 31. And I think it's going to be a defensive stop to win it. Obviously these predictions are not at all realistic. Maybe mine most, but it wouldn't surprise me to see more than 60 points scored in this game, just based on the firepower on both sides of the football. Last, most important question here: when you were in Buffalo, where was your go-to wing spot, and what did you dip those wings in?
This has been my favorite question. Everyone's like, what are we going with? Bar-Bill was one of my favorite spots, although honestly, everywhere that, like, off the beaten path that I tried, Elmo's was great. Gabriel's Gate barbecue wings were fantastic. But Bar-Bill are the ones that I dream about. Those honey butter barbecue.
New location in the North Towns now, by the way.
I know. I leave and they put it closer to where I was. It's fine. I'm not upset about it. And blue cheese, that's the only way to go. I tell everybody here because I joke. And I said this on GR earlier this week, and I have made some angry fans. But Pittsburgh is big ranch people. And I will preface by saying that their ranch here is very different. Like, it's what blue cheese is, like, as a specialty to Buffalo. Ranch is kind of a specialty to Pittsburgh. It's really good. I'm still not dipping my wings in it. It's blue cheese. You have to go blue cheese. That's it. It's a must.
Primanti Brothers, right? Is that still a go-to spot there?
Oh, I've been there. Yeah, it's so good.
It's good. It's like the classic. Everyone says, "Oh, you gotta go to Primanti's and get." It's like French fries on the sandwich. It's like this big. It's really good. It's a great I always say you gotta experience it. But no, I'm going Bar-Bill wings.
Bar-Bill, great choice, fantastic. I could never get in. Like, I don't know how many times I've gone and not been able to get in there. Great though, what a fantastic.
That's why they need a second location. They're so good.
It's a great selection. I'm glad you went with Bar. A lot of people have these under the radar spots, which I'm cool with. But you gotta go with they're by far one of the best. Gabriel's Gate's up there too. Yeah. Gabe's Gate. I'm a big Gabe's Gate fan, but Bar-Bill is my number one as well.
I just don't get wings out here on Long Island because it's just not worth it. So, yeah, I know. It breaks my heart.
I do have to say there have been some good Pittsburgh spots. There is a spot, and actually I had a friend from Buffalo that was visiting another one of our friends here, and he was like, we got wings, and I would get them again. Like, they were good. I'm like, yes, that's how I feel. I'm like, there's something special about the Buffalo wing, but the wing in Buffalo.
There you go. What's the name? Can you shout it out? I mean, I go to Pittsburgh. I got to know this. What wing?
What is it?
Big Shot Bob's.
Big Shot Bob's. Okay. Downtown, or is it?
They have like a bunch of little locations.
Okay.
It's kind of, I would put it into the context kind of like a Duff's, just in terms of like the
Okay.
areas that they're all in. And they all have kind of like their own different flavors, but the sauces are really good. So they
Okay,
actually,
Big
like,
Shot Bob's.
they stir blue cheese into the red hot sauce. So I'm like,
Ooh,
okay, I'll take
nice.
that too.
Hot blue. I like it. Well, too bad, like we started the show, it's a bummer that this game can't be played with fans. It would have been so great to have everyone up from down there. I have friends and family. I mean, you would have been up. It would have been fantastic to have that camaraderie. They have a lot in common with these cities. So that's just such a bummer. Hopefully we get a repeat of this in 2021, 3 years in a row. Will they play? They will play if they both finish first.
Yeah.
Will that mean Pittsburgh? It's so weird because
I
we
don't
play
know
in
where we
Tennessee
would play.
every year. I have to look that up if that would be in Buffalo or Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But we're looking forward to that.
I don't know if it switches or not, but yeah, you hope that both of them just like kind of continue the way that they are, finish top of the division. We get this again next year.
Yep, and then if it's in Pittsburgh, we'll just hop over to Big Shot Bob's and we can pod live from there. Who the hell knows? But Jenna, really appreciate you taking the time here. I know you said you've been on GR, you've done a lot of features and different podcasts and everything. So again, thank you for taking the time tonight.
Oh, sorry. Say that again. It cut out.
Oh, I'm just saying thank you for being here. I appreciate your busy schedule and everything.
Thank you guys for having me.
It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a great Sunday night game, and this could be similar to the Rams Chiefs from last year, just two juggernauts of teams, or 2 years ago. I'm sorry, but two just juggernauts of teams that ends up being the game of the year. So, it'd be nice to have a game over the Arizona-Buffalo game to overtake that as the game of the year this season. Hopefully this will be the one, but we won't know until Sunday night. Kickoff at 8:20 p.m. It's 8:15 or 8:20. It's Jenna's nodding her head, and it's 8:20. Make sure you guys are there. Get your Picassos for the game. Order it from in Western New York, in Buffalo, on Long Island, like I'm going to. Just make sure you stock up with some Picassos. Support our good friends over there. Support local businesses wherever you are. For myself, Kevin, all of Trainwreck Sports, and Jenna Harner, go Bills.